FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Gold had a remarkable run-up, then a slam down. Now it's really holding out nicely in that mid-$1,300 range, but definitely more to come. And I got with me now the author of Gold 10,000. You know him well, Nick Barisheff, Bullion Management Group Incorporated, the owner. Nick, welcome back.
Oh, my pleasure, Kerry. It's always good to talk to you.
Hey, so people are nervous, but they're nervous about the wrong things. They're nervous about gold and silver at exactly the moment they should be hoarding it and stocking up. Why is this, Nick? I never will understand this for as long as I live.
Well, this time around, we've had corrections all along in the past 10 years. Like gold's been going up, but it hasn't been going straight up. So there's been corrections. The difference this time is that the magnitude of the correction, and it was artificial. I mean, in April of last year, the first thing in the morning, the gold price dropped by $150, and the amount of gold sold naked short on the COMEX is what caused it. In the equity markets, if you sell something naked short, you go to jail. On the COMEX, it's perfectly legal. And then that happened again in June 20th. The price went down $80. The amount of gold that was sold in terms of futures contracts just doesn't exist in terms of that kind of sale. The U.S. is going to give back Germany's gold over a period of 7 years, yet they can short 440 tons in a morning. So anybody that is watching this would realize that this was a fantastic artificial gift given, and the price of gold went down and created a great buying opportunity, which is exactly what happened, because the retail demand skyrocketed all over the world. And coin shops had lineups, and they weren't to sell their gold, they were to buy. And the premiums went up to almost offset the decline. So the people that were aware of and had done some homework on the gold markets were not shaken out of this. But what did happen, and you have to understand ETFs and the whole interconnection between the physical markets and the paper markets, and that is that it triggers a sell-off on the GLD. But what happens, the GLD isn't an open-end mutual fund trust. What happens is gold is contributed to the GLD by authorized participants in exchange for shares, and it's redeemed only by authorized participants. So what happened was an avalanche of sales out of the GLD, an avalanche triggering sell stops on the COMEX and the GLD. So they just started the snowball rolling down the hill. And if someone didn't believe in manipulation and orchestrated markets, and they looked at this, they would become a believer.
Yeah, and the whole ETF trade there in GLD, the same people who are supposedly manipulating the trade or controlling gold prices, they're the trustees of GLD, correct?
That's right, but the thing is, it's not. The trustee has limited power. Where what happens is, at the authorized participant level, the trustee is just keeping the record. So I don't think there's anything they can do to manipulate it. But the same people that short futures contracts on the COMEX are the authorized participants that deal with the market making on the GLD to keep the premium discounts low. So it's those people that are playing a game between the COMEX and the GLD, and so on. Now, some of them happen to be the same as the trustees, but it's not happening at the trustee level, is what I'm saying.
Right. Okay. So it's the participant level, effectively. Right. And do you think they really have yeah.
Well, which are the big banks and brokerage houses, and so that's what's been happening. Now, J.P. Morgan, long time ago, admitted under oath in a lawsuit that you can't sue them because they are agents for the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve can't be sued. So that's in testimony under oath.
Right. So they're doing the government's bidding, effectively. Right. Sovereign immunity we're talking about.
Right. And it's important for the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. You can't have gold going up precipitously fast, because that says you're losing control of the currency and the economy and the financial markets and everything else. That's what gold is. It's a counter-indicator to how well the economy is being run. When everything's hunky-dory, the price of gold doesn't rise.
Right, which it didn't for so many years. And it's interesting, if you look back a month or so, that whole story broke about the people that found all those coins on their property in California, and they found $27,000 worth of coins face value, and the gold value of those coins, bullion value, melt value, was $1.8 million. So those coins had gone up 675 times their face value.
Right. Yeah, I remember reading about that. But that's the same. You see, all fiat currency is not just the U.S. dollar. They've all been declining against gold. And, if you go back to, when the Federal Reserve was created to today, the U.S. dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power. And it's basically the same thing for every other currency. It's just the purchasing power is lost when you create too much of the currency, which is what politicians and governments and central banks tend to do when they're given a printing press.
Yeah, but they need to try to make it look like they're not doing what you and I both know, and many of you out there know that they're doing, right?
That's right. So what's interesting is that the life of reserve currencies, the average life of reserve currencies throughout history has been 94 years. That's the average. And if you take 1920, when the Federal Reserve was created, in terms of this currency, we're at 94 years for the U.S. dollar.
Mm-hmm. So we're on borrowed time, effectively.
Well, and when you look at what's happening, China's signed 25 trade deals with countries where they'll settle the trade differences in their own currencies without the U.S. dollar anymore. When Australia signed the deal and their prime minister was making the press release, they noted, well, from here on in, we're not going to have much in the way of U.S. dollar reserves anymore because our major trading partner is China.
Mm-hmm. So that should have sounded the alarm.
But this is what's happening in the background subtly, and the mainstream media just is not reporting it. Like so many other things are just silent on the bad news.
And it is bad news if you're holding dollars, huh?
Oh, that's right.
So besides gold and silver, what else do you want to own?
Well, I think, given the geopolitics, that there's a variety of things like, the energy sector, oil, natural gas, uranium. I think all these things are going to be going up. Food is going to be going up, so everything associated to agriculture is probably do all right too. But your core holdings needs to be bullion and you invest from there depending on how rich you are and how old you are and all the rest of it. But you got to start with the core bullion holdings. Of used to be 10%. I would say today you need 20%.
Do you want to own real estate and be a debtor as well? Because the currency that you're going to hold your debts in is going to be the dollar as well, won't it?
Well, and real estate is a localized market, so you have to, there's vast differences from market to market and the type of real estate. Like farmland has been doing exceptionally well, whereas residential and some shopping malls haven't been doing so well. So you have to look at it case by case. You can't paint it with just one brush kind of thing.
Yeah, that's for sure. And definitely, like we started the conversation when we said hello, interesting times we're living in. And I want to talk more up next about what's happening in Europe with Crimea and other places.
FSN Radio.
When your accountant wants tax-free income, this is what he does. Accountants know the law. They also know that any American could legally get paid up to 3 times per month, 100% tax-free. That's 36 tax-free checks each year. It doesn't matter what you make already. This simple strategy could work for anyone. Go to www.irsrevenge2.com to learn how. That's irsrevenge2.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
We're back with Nick Barisheff, author of Gold 10,000. So, Nick, you just wrote this book last year, and I assume it's been doing pretty well, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'm impressed in terms of, if you go to Amazon, the number of people that have written in highly complimentary comments about how educational it is, which is what my intent was. So I'm happy with that. And the same thing, like we opened up a UK office, and on Amazon UK, there's also a lot of very favorable comments on the Amazon website.
Yeah, and for good reason. I mean, gold, since time immemorial, has been the reserve currency. You think it's going to become the reserve currency again?
I think that's a while off and might not be in my lifetime because there'll be too much political antagonism to do that. Like, the politicians don't want to have their spending controlled and not be able to buy votes by printing more money. So that's going to be fought tooth and nails, before that comes into being. Now, it may form part of a basket. They're talking about the, create special drawing rights and a basket of currencies, of which gold would be one. So that might be, part of the way to do it.
Yeah, well, the Chinese, right now in China, their shadow banking system seems to have evaporated overnight. So is that going to make the march towards gold any faster?
Well, I think that's what's going to happen. When you look around the world, it's almost too many vulnerabilities to list, because if you start with economic vulnerabilities, and when you look at, say, the U.S. economy, well, things aren't getting better, I'm sorry to say, because, when you look at the growth in people on food stamps, 47 million people on food stamps, home ownership in decline, disposable income in decline, the unemployment, length of time unemployment has risen to like 37 weeks. And they talk about the amount of trade the U.S. does with China in terms of how much they sell to China, but they don't talk about the reverse. But the deficit is $226 billion. So that's like borrowing $226 billion from China every year. And only 47% have full-time jobs, and the employment participation rate is at the lowest level in decades. This is not an economy improving by any stretch of the imagination. So the issue is that things aren't getting better. Then what you have is the geopolitics, which I'm sorry to say that the current administration's foreign policy is a disaster. All the time and effort and lives spent in Afghanistan and Iraq is now becoming a waste of time. The Middle East problems are growing, and now you've got Russia brokered the deal with Syria and Iran, and they're more or less off the rails, and Russia's not going to be helping out there. And the media talks about the sanctions they're going to impose on the Russians. Well, what do you think Putin's going to do? You think he's not going to impose sanctions? And we'll see whose are worse. And hopefully this doesn't escalate into some kind of cyber warfare, because Russia and China, I think, have the world's best hackers.
Yeah, it's not looking too promising, and really Europe is destabilized now. Who knows about these former Soviet republics?
But you go all over the world, it's the Middle East, Asia, Europe, South America. Look what's happening. The economies in Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Puerto Rico starting to look like Greece. So it's all the same story. Too much debt. The economy can't sustain it. Too many political promises all over the world.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun here. And
China.
Yeah, and then you look at China's shadow banking economy is just evaporating. And I see China in many ways resembling the U.S. in 1929, overcapacity all over the place, and markets drying up around the world because they're over indebted. And I made this prediction a couple of weeks ago. I believe EBT cards are coming to China because they're going to have to do what they have to do to buy peace among the public. They had a couple 100,000 riots last year. The Chinese, if they're starving, are not just going to line up in queues for soup kitchens. It's just not going to happen. So they're going to have to. But
there's also the problem in both China and Russia is that these are vast territories with a lot of provinces where in states of various form that want independence and this and that. So they've got huge internal, political problems in, both cases. So the bottom line is that there's so many black swan possible events in the background that I believe that what's going to happen isn't going to be a slow progressive rise in the gold price, is that things will start happening during the week, then comes the weekend, then we're going to wake up Monday morning and the gold price will be double.
And then
that's how I think it's going to happen.
And then what will that do to the price of silver? That'll go way beyond that.
That's right.
Because
but it's not going to be something gradual where everybody can sit back and say, well, looks like things are getting worse. Now is the time. You're either going to be in it or you'll miss it.
Yeah. It won't be where say, I think I'll call bullion management group on Monday and I'll buy some gold, right?
Yeah, and our phones will be busy and the lineup will be several days long.
I've been telling people this for years, Nick. Most of the time they roll their eyes and say, I'm doing so well in Google, I could care less about gold.
Yeah, but this is just human nature. When you think about, Hurricane Sandy and the warnings and everything else, and then all the people that did nothing. It's just human nature. You're going to have hurricane warnings, you can have tornado warnings, and people sit there dumbfounded until it actually hits.
Yeah, it's like the only time money really matters is when you don't have any. The only time you really need a gun is when you don't have one. And the only time gold doesn't matter and silver is when you need them and you don't have them, right?
You're exactly right.
And like you said, human nature to put off tomorrow what you could do today.
Right. So it's the kind of thing that, notwithstanding it's human nature to procrastinate, and everybody's busy with work and family, but this is the area where, in terms of preparedness generally, financial preparedness is something that you've got to devote some time and actually do. There's no downside to it. You have to devote some time to actually do it.
Yeah. And you don't have to overstudy and overanalyze this thing. You get a book like yours, a book like mine, a few books out there. You go to Kitco, you read some columns. You have enough information. You don't have to become an expert like you. You've devoted your life to it. Me, I've devoted Austrian economics. I've been studying it for the past 37 years.
Right.
You don't have to go to those extremes, right?
Exactly. So, and you don't have to, move into a bunker in the country and stock up on beans and guns, but you can do, preparations, because we don't know the kind of event that's going to happen. Some event's going to happen, but sooner or later you're going to need to be prepared.
Yeah,
that's almost a guarantee. And whatever that event is will have economic implications where you're going to have both physical cash as well as physical silver on your possession.
Great point you raised about cash, and I've got a question for you up in Canada about that, and we got to make it kind of fast. Our currency here in the U.S., they're just not replacing it like they once did, and all the money, currency, in circulation is filthy, disgusting, falling apart. Is it like that in Canada?
Well, we've come up with a new currency, and it's sort of like plastic, which is harder to forge and everything, but you got to make sure you don't leave it in your pants when you put your pants through the dryer.
It'll melt, huh?
Right.
Well, tell us where we get your book, where we find you on the internet to order precious metals.
Well, the book is on Amazon, and it's $10,000 gold, so that's the easiest place to buy it. It's in, a hard copy as well as, Kindle versions and so on. So that's the easiest way. And then we deal with largely high net worth investors for the larger bars for purchase and allocated storage. We store it in Canada and Hong Kong and New York. So we can accommodate people. We're price competitive, and the process is as easy as we can make it within current regulatory environments.
And it's bmgbullion.com. Just go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Check the show notes to this interview. Link is there to Nick's site. Nick, always a pleasure. Talk to you again soon. Hopefully spring will be there in your neck of the woods very shortly, and you can warm up and go enjoy the good weather.
Great. Thank you for having me.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.